Hello and welcome back. My name is Anders Tveit. I'm your teacher. This time to present what I've called the use of models in macroeconomics. In this video I will talk about how we use tools in macroeconomics. This will be both about mathematical equations and about figures, but I will focus mostly on the figures we use. Let me start by going back to a topic mentioned in my first video. It was about endogenous and exogenous variables and the difference between these two. While mathematicians use independent and dependent variables, we use exogenous and endogenous. And what more, the order is important. You start with the exogenous variables and you don't explain them. You only say, suppose an exogenous variable change. Then we move on to the model to discuss what we think will happen in the economy. After a discussion, we end up with an answer. And the answer is what will happen to the endogenous variable. Let us look at an example taken from math. As you see here, suppose the following equation explains the connection between demand X and price P. So, as a mathematician, we would say that P is independent and X is the dependent variable. As economists, we would say that P is exogenous and X is the endogenous variable. The result, the endogenous variable X depends on the exogenous variable P. In other words, you don't get X equal to 3 if not P equals 4. Another important issue, this is true as long as any other factor influencing the demand for X is constant. Other factors could be disposable income, the price of other goods, or it could be consumers' preferences. We can also explain the same thing by using a figure. Then economists are used to set X on the horizontal axis and P on the vertical axis, as you see it here. We also say that this point is a point on the demand curve. Then let us draw the whole demand curve. So here, as you say, see the demand curve and what we call the inverse demand curve. So if we read from left, we say that demand X depends on many factors, but one in particular, that is the price. The number 5 stands for any other factor than price, and as long as these factors remain constant, we do not change the number. The latter context is as follows. If P goes up with 1, then demand goes down with 0.5. Because we use a figure with P on the vertical axis, we also turn it around and call it the inverse demand curve. Then we get, this is the inverse. This is the same as the original demand curve. The only difference is the order. If we want to draw the whole demand curve, we can put X equal to 0 into the equation. Then P will be 10. As you see here. Another possibility would be to find X if P is 0. The answer is that X equal to 5 if P equals to 0. Then we can draw the whole demand curve. Here's the whole demand curve. So far, we have only talked about demand. A market consists of 3 factors: demand, supply, and the meeting between the two. So here we have three possibilities, three topics we can discuss. There's demand, there's the supply, and the meeting. So the third thing here would be, how can we explain the market they meet in? Is it one supplier, or what we will call a monopoly, or is it a competition well working? If the latter, this is what we see here is the latter, then do we reach an equilibrium price? Could be a question. And if yes, then we typically take the equilibrium as a starting point. So the cross here would be a starting point. So let's move on to topics, examples. What could we discuss? Questions to solve. Suppose the disposable income increase. What will happen to price and volume traded? So we start with the equilibrium, and then we shift demand to the right. And we say that you get higher price and higher volume traded because increasing income creates excess demand. So we assume this will happen if this good is a normal good, not an inferior good. Let's move on then to another example we use in macroeconomics. In macroeconomics, we look at the total amount of supply and demand. The supply side is also called output or total income in a society. As you see here, demand and supply, or output or income, it's also called. A question here would be, how will people in a country react if their income increase? Answer, they will increase their demand for consumption, but also save some of it. This is a typical assumption we use. So both more consumption, but also more savings. This is what we would call the desired demand. And as you can see here, the slope of the curve is less than a 45-degree line. If it was a 45-degree line, then we would say that more income, more consumption, no savings. So as long as we have some savings, then we get a slope less than 45-degree. And also we start from more than zero. So if no supply or no income, then we assume we will still have some demand. So this would be what will happen to demand if we increase supply or income, this line. And then we add another assumption. The economy will move towards an equilibrium. Supply equals demand. How do we introduce this into the model? We do so by introducing a 45-degree line from origin here, where supply equals demand. The 45-degree line here would be where supply equals demand, or where income equals demand. And then we get an equilibrium here, where we have desired demand equal to income, and also supply equal to demand. So this would be an example of an equilibrium. And also it would be a starting point. But let's add another important thing we do in our models. How to explain that equilibrium will occur? And the answer to this, we start from a point different than equilibrium and explain what will happen. So we say, assume we are somewhere else. We don't explain it like an exogenous variable. We just say, assume we're somewhere else, And then what will happen? So suppose we have excess supply. What will happen? That could be one example. So then we start, we don't say why, we just say, suppose we are here, what will happen? Production will go down because we have more supply than demand. So that's the answer to this question. So then if we start out here, we will go down closer to equilibrium. And the opposite, if we start from downstairs here, and the opposite, if we start from below equilibrium, the production will increase because we have excess demand. This video has been about the tools we use in macroeconomics. When we meet in class, I will spend time practicing by using figures like the ones I have used here. So, see you in class then.